Okay, all right, we're live. Hello, everyone. So today I have a kind of interesting debate discussion with Jinx. I saw one of his videos that he did about like the majority report and sort of this discussion Michael Brooks was having about this interaction with Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro about kind of gay marriage and the gay sort of marriage debate and how Ben Shapiro feels about those things. And I want to have a more in-depth discussion with him about like sort of that video and Dave Rubin and like I guess social justice in general because we have some sort of differences of opinion and like I think it could be an interesting discussion. So, do you want to introduce yourself and like just give a brief summary of what you do on YouTube?
Well, I kind of do a little bit of different things on my channel. It's Jinx462 on YouTube. But my channel started off where I was doing what had been dibbed by somebody on Twitter that ran some kind of art forum. They found my videos and they called them video game video art. And at one point, I wanted to break away from that because all I played at the time was Tomb Raider, and I've since moved on to The Last of Us. But I still do those from time to time, and they take an extraordinary amount of time. I mean, the
Hmm.
editing in that is just hours. But I, I've been highly influenced by skeptics that came before people. Yeah, I'm sure everybody knows these names and
Yeah.
in this field. People like Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, those people. But honestly, I used to be a big fan of Penn and Teller's bullshit. And when I found the skeptic community, I noticed what Sargon of Akkad was doing, and that is what he does is he takes media like mainstream news media, and he breaks down their argument into a premise and conclusion and points out the fallacies, the logical fallacies in them. That's all he does. And I thought, well, that's really easy to do. I can do that. But I didn't want to be like all the rest of them. I wanted to be myself. And in fact, a lot of the videos that I make, I try to do them um, before they do them in the beginning. I tried to do them before first. I just wanted to find some pseudosciency things that I could easily debunk. And I kept running into this term called social justice warriors. When I first heard that term, I thought, "Oh, this is junk. This is conspiracy theory." And then I ran into it in real life, and I was like, "Okay, yeah, this could potentially present." And so I started doing content based around that, mostly around the restrictive like speech. So I guess you could say I'm an advocate of free speech,
Hmm.
and that's where it kind of began. Is what and I've gone over this with an actual Marxist before, somebody who actually does like enjoy Marxist philosophy,
Hmm.
and I explained this story to him as well. Is that I got in trouble for sexual harassment on a female. I, a homosexual male, got in trouble for sexually harassing a female because I said, and I didn't even say it to their face. I said it to coworkers. I said, I don't know whoever it is that I said this out of frustration. I was just really frustrated because they kept asking me, can we go home? Can we go home? Can we go home? And I'm like, well, I haven't worked here that long. I can't get the bosses to release us early. Let the person. And eventually they asked to the point where I got frustrated. I was like, look, I'm not this person. I don't know whoever it is that she knows. I just hope whoever it is that she knows, at least the pussy tastes good for her. Wasn't even implying that anything sexual was actually going on. I was just basically a really crass way of calling her a brown noser, or saying that she's worked there long enough to establish a relationship with the boss people, which is normal human behavior. And even after saying it, I apologize. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I said that out of frustration. I apologize. But it was weird to me. And I would have totally accepted being in trouble for inappropriate language in the workplace environment, because that's what it is. That was inappropriate language for the workplace environment. But to be written up permanently for sexual harassment as a homosexual male, someone who has absolutely no interest in the female form,
Well, I'm
was
sure you're not
mind-blowing
making the
to me.
argument that gay men cannot sexually harass women, right?
I don't see how they can. I can see how it's perceived that way.
Oh, they definitely
But
can. I had a boss once who was gay who like would like grab women's asses and but then be like, "Oh, I'm gay, so it's okay." Like he was the boss, so nothing ever happened, but that's sexual harassment, and he got away with it. But yeah, I mean, you can't do things to people if they don't want them to be done to them, or say things about people. I mean, I don't
that,
know about your
that, that
case,
is
but
true.
just talking in the macro, like I don't think sexual like proclivities matter in terms of harassment. You know, a lesbian
No,
woman
you're
could harass a
absolutely
man for
right
sure,
on that
right?
account. Right, right, absolutely. And I've been harassed, sexually harassed by
Yeah,
women.
yeah,
But
exactly,
no,
exactly, yeah,
you're absolutely right on that count. If there's a homosexual man and he's going up and he's grabbing genital areas of a woman, they say, stop, don't do that. No. But that would also make me question their actual sexual orientation at that point. Are they really homosexual? Are they more
yeah,
bisexual?
yeah. I mean, some people are just kind of like he was just kind of an asshole. Like that's like kind of why he did it. I can see why they would write things up though, like because you have to have some kind of so like let's say just take a for instance. So we have a person who works at a company who continually does behavior that the company doesn't like. You have to have some kind of codified, like legally written. This incident happened. It's this person saw it happen. It happened to this person. So if they have to take either illegal action or if they fire the person, that there's a written reason why they did it. It's not like there's we fired him and it was sexual harassment. You know, like that way there's I'm not sure exactly what the term is, but there's a written history of what happened.
Yeah, documentation,
Yeah,
written
exactly.
documentation.
Yeah, yeah. But I feel like that's sort of another tangent. So why don't we talk about your video about the Majority Report taking on this interaction with Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro. So what was the main, I guess, the main gist of your problem with Michael Brooks and their take on it?
Well, it was Sam Cedar. Sam Cedar was just really irritating to me because he seemed to be coming from a position of being patronizing.
Hmm.
You know, that kind of like, well, you're a minority, so I'm going to be friends with you, and that makes me really progressive. And it's like, well, that's kind of obnoxious. Like, why can't you treat homosexual people like we're just people? Why does this have to fit into this identity?
Uh-huh. Oh, just one clarification. So the host at that time was Michael Brooks, who is like the co-host. So sometimes he hosts the show, the main show. Sam Cedar's the guy with the glasses. So Michael Brooks is kind of like the B team guy. But he has a
I
very
don't watch.
yeah. I totally get it. Yeah, I totally get
I,
it.
I, I don't watch. I don't watch. So I don't. I wouldn't know that. I see Sam Cedar and I see
Mhm.
the Minority Report, and I watch this thing, and they're picking nothing but ad hominem attacks directed at Dave Rubin, and it's like they're mad because he's interviewing somebody who is opposed to gay marriage. And
Mhm.
I'm not. If you look into arguments, Ben Shapiro is not just against gay marriage; he's against marriage altogether. He thinks marriage should not even be considered by the government at all.
Mhm. Okay.
And this is not something that is new to me coming from a religious standpoint. And I am anti-theistic. I don't really care for religion. And that's particularly why is it creates kind of divides in people's minds like, oh, you know, my Bible says that what you do is wrong. and they are infamous for cherry picking through their shit to try and come up with these what they
Yeah.
perceive as moralistic arguments. And there's a philosopher that talked about this, that you cannot use science or religion to decide if homosexuality is moral or not. And I agree with him on that. And the reason, one of the main things that he brings up in that is that many, many times when we look at homosexuality, we do not take into account the romantic aspect of homosexuality. Many people only think about what occurs in the bedroom and they go, ew, that's gross. And it's like, well, homosexuality isn't just about sex, it's about mental attraction, romantic attraction, kissing, holding hands, going on the first date, everything that heterosexual people do. And
Hmm.
people like Ben Shapiro, I think, don't look at that aspect. The people who
Yeah.
argue from a theistic standpoint don't look at that aspect. They just go, well, a man fucks another man
Yeah.
in the ass, and
Yeah.
that's just not
Yeah.
acceptable.
So I do have one
And
contention
it's
though
like,
about Ben Shapiro's reasons for being against gay marriage. So I kind of like in my head, like the way I thought about it is like Ben Shapiro is really sort of like a gay marriage confederate. Like he believes in the lost cause of gay marriage. He's sad that they lost, but he still believes in it.
yes,
So his justification has changed over time. So I actually looked at some of the things he said about gay marriage, and so the opinion you stated of his is basically new. This is his like his Confederate like lost cause justification because like they lost, they're in the minority position. So you can't just say I'm against gay marriage
right,
because I think that marriage is ordained by my God, and therefore it should be the state should enact that in law, codify it in law. He can't really say that anymore because that's like people be like, no, that's stupid. Like gay, like because there are people within
yeah,
his own religion, his own religion. There's a ton of gay people, and there's a ton of people who think no, like our religion, Judaism, allows for gay marriage. So let me just read a couple things that he said about gay marriage. So he said, I think this was in like 2007, I believe. He said, marriage is implicitly about the relationship between man and woman. Marriage is codification of the idea that a man and a woman in a committed and sexual union make each other and the surrounding society better. Okay, so for him, marriage is a man and a woman, codified by the government, ordained by God, basically. And he said to the Jewish Voice, I think it was like 2013, he said the gay rights movement and the broader American left celebrate the same-sex marriage decision in wild fashion because the decision establishes two fundamental notions. First, that government has replaced God in the moral pantheon of the United States. And second, that the new God government has the power to root out and destroy any God-based institutions, destroying the social capital and fabric that holds together the nation. So for him, the debate is intrinsically about religion. It is a religious argument for him, and it always has been. So he wants the
right.
government to enshrine religious forms of marriage as being above others. So if religion says marriage is between a man and a woman, that needs to be enshrined by the government and protected. Not some kind of secularization is destruction of religious institutions to him. So
And
he actively wants the government involved to protect a sort of religious interpretation of marriage.
well, he sounds also like somebody who would absolutely be in favor of separation in church and state, because if he got separation of church and state to its full capacity, the church would be able to openly discriminate against gay marriage while the state would not be allowed to. But the position for that would be that, let's say, his synagogue did not want to recognize gay marriage, they're not obligated to. And I don't personally have a problem with that. I think if your
Sure.
religious institution doesn't want to recognize gay marriage, that's fine. That you're a private institution, you should be able to do that. But what you cannot do is say that the state, that the federal government shouldn't recognize gay couples, because the problem that happens with that is that you get into power of attorney. Too many horror stories from the 90s that we shouldn't be reliving from that.
Yeah.
And but a question that I have to that is that so the Minority Report, is it a majority or minority report?
It's majority. And one other thing too, like his beliefs on the separation of church and state are also very muddled. Like he doesn't believe in an actual separation. He doesn't believe that the institutions of the government have to not place one religion over another. He doesn't believe that. He believes that the separation of church and state was to protect the church from the state, not the other way around. So he believes that if there was like, you know, Ten Commandments kind of stuff like at a courthouse, he would probably think that that would be okay. It's just that the government cannot force one single religion on some people, basically.
So in this instance, we agree that Ben Shapiro is an obnoxious individual. And I actually made a video specifically dedicated to Ben Shapiro where I was knocking on him because he brings up family values like crazy. And there's
Yeah.
tons of statistics out there that show that that children raised in a single parent home can be just as fine as a child reared in a
Yeah,
dual parent home. In
totally.
fact, the kids who committed the Columbine incident came from a two-parent household,
Mm-hmm.
and they actually fairly decent household, in the middle of suburbia, like the white picket fence dream, blah 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 blah, whatever you want to say. And it's like a place that you would think would not foster this type of toxic behavior, in fact, did. And there's other examples of that as well, like Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer came from a very Christian-based household where his parents were together. They're still together to this day, to my understanding.
Yeah, it's really about how
So
much wealth the people that are raising you have and what environment they put you in, right? So if you have a single parent that makes $200,000, probably better than two parents that make 50,000, right?
well, I mean, everybody's story is different. I don't know. I can't say that for sure. But I think it would definitely be easier if you had a higher income to be a single parent.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so we would both agree we don't like Ben Shapiro. But the question that I would have for you is that if Ben Shapiro was in front of you and you were given the opportunity to interview him, would you greet him with contempt or resentment? I mean, just
yeah.
foster would you be hostile towards him, or would you want to be involved in a more proactive conversation? Because the thing is with
Yeah, I would ask him hard questions for
political
sure.
opponents. Well, yeah, but I mean, with political opponent, what you want to do is you want to find out how this person thinks, why they
Mhm.
think the way that they do, where they come to these conclusions, because he can keep citing Bible verses, but ultimately that stigma about homosexuality, I have a feeling stems much deeper than religious affiliation, because there's many people who have reconciled their religious beliefs and have become okay with gay marriage and homosexuality. My grandparents being one of them. They're
Mhm.
My grandmother is in her 80s. My grandfather is in his 90s. They're both staunch conservative Republicans and Christian. They're okay with LGBT rights. So if they can reconcile their differences, and they still proclaim to be conservative Republican Christians to this day, and they're okay with this. I would very much describe them as egalitarian, humanitarian. Now, if we got on the topic of economics, my grandparents and I would definitely disagree with each other on
Yeah.
economics.
So
But as far as like humanitarian
mhm.
rights, we would be on the same page. But
Here's
my
what I think.
question
So
is
I think I can kind of
if you
summarize
were
it for
to,
you.
but I really do want,
Like what
okay.
their objection to it's not that they have a problem with him interviewing him. It's that they think that Dave Rubin doesn't understand the level of like ingrained homophobia that people like Ben Shapiro have, and it was revealed in that case where it's like, oh, can my husband bake you a cake? No, I wouldn't want that. Like, oh, would you want to go to our anniversary party? No, I really wouldn't want to do that. And it's like at that point you got to realize that this guy, again, he is in for the cause of being against gay marriage, something that Dave Rubin
Right.
benefits from. And so he has to understand that this person is ideologically opposed to his rights, and he will basically always be ideologically opposed to his rights, and there's nothing that he can do about it. And Ben Shapiro is never going to be someone who's going to advocate for the right for someone like Dave Rubin to have marriage. But people on the left will, people who he thinks are horrible, you know. That's kind of the point, I
I
think.
don't think he thinks ever. I don't think Ben. I don't think Ben Shapiro probably thinks everybody on the left is horrible. I don't think Dave Rubin thinks that. But I also don't think that it's a good idea to assume what Dave Rubin's position is. I think we would have to talk to Dave Rubin about that. But being that he's in his third the 90s and lived to see things like Matthew Shepard and probably did do some studying on the Stillwell incident. Um, as well as dealing with Westboro Southern Baptist Church. Now, I have had a lot of dealing with that group because I am only 2 hours away from Topeka, where Reverend Phelps lived,
Yeah.
and he's protested me several times,
Mm.
but
Yeah,
that's
he's
neither
burning
here
in
nor there
hell
now
right now,
because he's
hopefully.
dead.
Yeah.
I don't believe
Yeah,
he's now.
exactly.
I
He's
think
not.
he's dead.
But he is dead,
He's
so
gone. He's not a problem anymore. But the thing is I think Dave Rubin is interviewing him in a way that other leftists won't, because a lot of, and this is what I was telling you, is that when I try to gather information and facts, libertarians and right-leaning people are more willing to divulge information and have a civilized, and I can't stress that word enough, civilized conversation about given topics. Whereas the left, if I say something that they disagree with, I'm automatically just dismissed. It's like I've been dehumanized. I've actually been accused of being a Trump supporter, to which I am not. I'm definitely not. I hate that fucking guy. I fucking can't stand him.
yeah.
And I've also been accused of being anti-LGBT, which is hilarious to me. Like, really? You think I'm anti-LGBT? Because I bring up a point of criticism that might have some inkling to the left. But what I'm looking for is the left's argument, and all they come up with is, well, you're stupid. Basically, a bunch of ad hominem attacks where they just call me names. The other tactic or strategy that they'll use is they'll say, well, think about it, or I'm not going to do your homework for you.
Sure,
And
yeah.
it's like, well, either you can answer the question or you can't. If you can't answer the question, it's fine. I'm not going to demonize you because you don't know the question. And that's the thing with the interview with Ben Shapiro, with Dave Rubin, is that this is an interview between somebody who back in the 90s would have been considered a leftist and still probably does consider himself to be a centrist leftist today. It's just that the way that things have gone in our social political environment, it's really hard to have these sort of proactive and civil discussions. And I think that that's what he's trying to promote, is saying, hey, I can have a civil discussion with somebody who is bigoted towards who I am. It's possible.
Yeah, yeah. I think again, the majority report and their kind of critique of Dave Rubin is that, so first off, like Dave Rubin doesn't really interview a lot of progressive people, like at all. In the last year, he's like the most left-wing person he interviewed was David Frum, who's a neocon. Okay. So he doesn't, so he actively platforms people like Ben Shapiro who are kind of antithetical to his views, at least on the like gay marriage part. And their critique
Um,
of him is like Dave Rubin sort of like, because he's won his equality, he's sacrificed that to talk to people who were like Dave Rubin now is like against, basically against the government in a lot of different libertarian-esque ways. You know, he wants lower taxes and he's like against the government doing anything for climate change, stuff like that. And so it's like his priorities have shifted, but he doesn't seem to understand that these people are still strongly rooted against his rights. And the reason why he will continue to have rights is that the left has to have some kind of institutional power. Otherwise, they could easily be a backslide. I think that's a critique of him.
And well, and there is truth in that, but the thing is that there's a lot of libertarians and a lot of, like my grandparents, right-leaning people that are in support of LGBT rights. They absolutely are. And I'd go as far as to say that my grandparents have gone into the LGBTQIA plus rights.
Mm-hmm.
And that when you get into LGBTQI plus, I'm like, I don't know what any of this means. You
Sure.
lost me.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Understandable.
And that's because I've been a fan of individual expression and individual identity for as long as I've been alive.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing that like as far back as I can remember. And so when I see somebody who's androgynous and they want to identify as a different pronoun, I'm like, why? Why do you need to be separate from the category of LGBT? Why are you not just a part of that group? You're otherizing yourself at that point. I don't know anyone in my circle of friends that has a problem with a male that is more feminine but doesn't want to transition. No problem with that, nor a female that's more masculine that doesn't want to transition. Nobody I know, not even conservatives that I know, have a problem with that. The fact that they want to be a different category altogether. I'm getting off track. Okay, I
Yeah. Because
digress.
like when I think of that, I
So,
understand how you feel and what you're saying. I just think that there's, and this is the sort of the thing that I've sort of realized is like people are used to one thing and then things that are different kind of make them feel uncomfortable. And so then they have a sort of reflexive reaction to it. And people are kind
I'm
of,
just
sometimes
like,
people are bad
what?
about questioning their reflexiveness. And then they say, well, no, I'm not wrong about being reflexive. It's them that's wrong for being different.
I don't think they're wrong for being different. I think it's weird when you have mandatory pronouns. I mean, if somebody comes up and calls me a she, I don't think that should be a criminal offense. I don't identify as
Well,
a she in any way, shape, or form.
yeah, that's
But
a
I don't
whole,
want them to be in trouble for
yeah,
it.
that's a whole nother thing because I think most of the places where it's codified, it's for the employer, for someone who, if my landlord misgenders me and I'm transitioning, do I have a legal right to kind of have a recourse? If they continually, deliberately misgender me, do I have a legal recourse to do something about it? So
And the key word
you
in
have to
there
have these
is
laws to do that.
deliberate. It's
Yeah, I don't think
deliberate. That's the
anyone,
key word in there.
I don't think there's ever been a case where someone accidentally misgendered someone and they got legally reprimanded. I don't think
Well,
that's
and
ever
you
happened
also have
anywhere.
cases. You also have cases too where they're comfortable with it. Like I have a friend who is gender fluid, and I refer to him as his biological gender, and he doesn't have any problem with that. But then again, I've known him for years.
Yeah. I think people have
But
just like,
I digress.
yeah, just people have kind of overreacted on that.
Back on
But
the
yeah,
Dave Rubin and
so
Shapiro.
would
I
you
do have to
agree?
say, Dave
Would you
Dave
agree
Rubin
that Dave
did get
Rubin doesn't really
Richard
talk a lot?
Dawkins.
He doesn't talk to a lot of like actively like progressive people, like left wing progressive people who can actually make a strong left wing case for, and like not a straw man, but like an actual strong argument for these different left wing ideas.
I I think he tries. I mean, you see, if you follow him on Twitter, he does try quite a lot to get these leftists on. But as we go back to the scenario that I gave you from my personal experience, let's say, is that the problem is the right are more receptive to having a civil conversation than people that come from the left that would be able to make that argument that you're looking for. Like what we're doing right here
Uh-huh.
is more proactive than going out on the internet and just spewing rhetoric and ad hominems back and
Yeah.
forth at each other because of something that we disagree on. It's like, let's discuss what we disagree on. Let's
Yeah,
discuss it. Why do you disagree?
I agree with that. But I think the last person he tried to have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on for a debate with Ben Shapiro, not to like talk to her for an hour and like let her make her case. He wants to have her on to debate a right winger, and he'll moderate, I guess. But a lot of people they like later I'll tell you a story about this, but a lot of people have wanted him to interview ContraPoints. Had still hasn't happened. Probably never going to happen.
Will ContraPoints do it
One
though?
hundred
That's the
percent.
question.
100%. Yeah.
She
Like
will?
ContraPoints. The one of the reasons why ContraPoints exists is because of Dave Rubin. Like the Dave Rubin evolution into the classical liberal is one of the reasons why she felt like she needed to create a channel that's like the left wing case. Like she's like a counter to him in a way, and some other discourse. Like there was, I feel like in 2016, 17, there was a lot of like really virulent right wing alt right stuff on YouTube that kind of flooded the marketplace of ideas, if, as it were. But yeah, I mean, or H. Bomber guy is another left wing guy from England. He's like, there's a bunch of people that would go on his show, but he won't talk to them. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with him personally. Like he wants to, like, he's always trying to get bigger. He's concerned about his status as a person. He's trying to like make more money and interview more interesting people. He's not really concerned about. I don't think he's really concerned about having interesting discussions as much as he is about like things that help Dave Rubin become more popular.
Well, that would be the point of anyone that like I mean, you look at somebody like Larry King. I think that's his ultimate goal. So if his ultimate goal is to do that, he wants to talk to the most prominent figures that he can, and he did in 2018. He did do an interview with Richard Dawkins, who is a leftist. But unfortunately, some particular think groups of the left, of what I would call the authoritarian left, have even tried to shut down Richard Dawkins,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
I find absolutely bizarre.
yeah. I would agree with that. I wouldn't really put Richard Dawkins in the same as like doing a full on straight up interview with like Alexandria or ContraPoints or Destiny, or there's a bunch of people like I can't even name all of them, but I mean, and that's what he wants to do. Like I have no problem if he wants to interview right wing people all day or like more right wing atheists or like that's fine. That's totally fine. And I mean, and even like when he talks to someone like Sam Harris, I mean, Sam Harris is probably one of the most close to left wing people that he really talks to. Honestly, I have no problem with that. But like, you can't also say, "Oh yeah, I'm not a right winger. I'm not in this to like push right wing ideas." Like he really is. Like that's his audience now is like people that used to be leftists who became right, or people that are right wing and like hate identity politics or something. Like that's his thing. That's it. That's all he does now. Like there's no discussion from the left wing side. There's a lot of discussion on the right
Well,
wing side.
that that's where I think both these two different diverging lefts do need to have a conversation, because a lot of people look at my channel, a lot of older folks have come forward and said, "You remind me of what liberals look like in the 90s." And that's where I get my philosophies from my political stances, is being a liberal from the 90s, which is I am very anti-authoritarian. I'm like, don't tell me what to do. But the left did this kind of shift where they're like, we want to tell people what to do. And I'm like, I can't stand behind that. I just can't.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think there
And it's
has
like,
been a
so
shift. I wouldn't totally put it in those
so
terms, but I
where's
agree.
that?
There has been a shift, but I think a lot of it has been on an economic axis and also like understanding. So like during the Obama years, there was this large sort of social justice movement, like Black Lives Matters and some other stuff like that, where these ideas came to the forefront and they got assimilated into like the left wing sort of politic. And so some of it is definitely
And
like
these things
accrued.
become
Mhm. Yeah, go ahead.
well, some of those things are divisive,
Mhm.
and they don't. A lot of people don't perceive them as divisive, but then when you see like how the black community starts treating white people, and it's like, well, we're not progressing forward anymore. We're going backwards, back to the separate but equal type thing, and that didn't work back in the 1950s. It's not going to work now. It's not a good idea. Again, we're better united, not divided.
Yeah,
And
I
so when
would
I see,
I would agree that like any type of using identity politics to divide people is not great. What I always say is identity politics is the refuge of people who are attacked because of their identity, or they have specific issues because of their of immutable things about themselves. And so because they're the only people that really care about their issue, they have to band together to advocate for social change. So a good example I've used recently is like people that are disabled. Like disabled people came together to get the Americans with Disabilities Act passed to make it easier for them to exist in uh, spaces, basically. And so, like you could say that that's identity politics, and in a sense it is, but that's sort of removing what the whole point of it is, which is a positive thing to create social change to help these people who have these immutable things about themselves more easily live in society. And those are the things, those are the good things that we can use from these type of movements, and we have to like take the good things from them and not like essentialize people's identity and say, oh, because you're not disabled, you don't understand me, blah blah blah, stuff like that, right?
well, another example that I've seen of this kind of divisive behavior is more political based. Like, all I have to do to get a bunch of leftist people to attack me is say CNN is wrong on this particular article, and they'll come out and they will just attack me. And it's like, wow. So you're basically saying that if I consume a particular sort of media that isn't your media, then automatically I am not a part of your political spectrum. Or furthermore, if more right-leaning libertarian, they're humanized and they're not worth the time of day or listening to their. And I think that that's the wrong approach to do things.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. I think, at least in my experience, to a certain extent, um, the number of people that are actually right wing that want to have an actual discussion is like kind of small. Like a lot of them would prefer to say the left won't talk to us while also strawmanning the left. Like that feels like what their current tactic is. I mean, just to give an example, that's something that happened with Jordan Peterson. So there was a Marxist college professor who wanted to have a discussion with him because, to be totally honest, Jordan Peterson does not understand Marxism like at all. He just kind of strawmans it. And they were going to have a discussion, and then basically Jordan Peterson sort of pulled out. But what he did was he said, "In order for me to appear, you have to pay me a bunch of money." And it was like a community college, and they couldn't pay him all that money to appear. And so then he says, "Oh well, I don't need to debate him because they're Stalinists." And so it's like they kind of play this game both ways, where they're like, no one wants to talk to me, but then people want to talk to them, and they're like, I don't want to talk to you because you're X, you know.
And that's more engaging and otherizing people. And that's I don't agree with that. I just
Yeah,
don't.
I think both sides don't like this. This is sort of the echo chamber problem of
Both sides are guilty of it,
yeah, yeah,
aren't they?
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
but in my experience, like there's a ton of people, that they kind of like do on the right. It's very prominent people. Jordan Peterson's one of those prominent intellectuals in the world, and it's not going to stop him from strawmanning Marxists at all. Like that's his modus operandi right now. Like that's why he's so popular, right? So they have a megaphone. They're using a megaphone to attack like people on the left, and people on the left, I don't know, they don't have any actual advocate.
The left has advocates. They do.
Yeah, I mean,
I
no,
would say I'm an advocate
uh-huh.
for the left, but I'm not a Marxist leftist.
Yeah,
Like that's what I have to keep reminding people. The political, like the quadrant political spectrum, you have the authoritarian left, the authoritarian right, the anti-authoritarian left, and the anti-authoritarian right. I'm on the anti-authoritarian left, which is not Marxism is in the authoritarian left.
Yeah, I mean, definitely some versions of it. I would agree with that. If you're like, send rich people to gulags, yeah, you're an authoritarian leftist. But I don't
Yes.
know if I would totally, right? Yeah, I don't know if I would totally put someone who says, I believe that everyone should have health care, everyone should have food, everyone should have clothing, everyone should have a house. I don't know if I would totally put them in authoritarian right away because
Well,
there
you
are,
can
yeah,
achieve that without Marxism. You can achieve that with a mixed economy.
yeah. But like if you're a Marxist and you believe in that, I don't think that immediately makes you an authoritarian leftist. Um,
The reason why they call it authoritarian is because you're demanding that they have to pay for this.
yeah, I mean, like that's kind of how
It's a force.
economics.
It's
Yeah,
like taking a piece of bureaucracy and pretending it's a gun and holding it to someone's forehead and saying, "You have to give these people. You have to do it."
yeah.
And so
I mean, but
that's why it's considered authoritarian.
yeah, I mean that's kind of the same like with our military, right? Like we all have to pay for the military to exist and do things, even if we don't
Yeah.
agree, right? And so I think it's sort of like
Right.
what are our priorities? Like, why does our government not prioritize these things that help people get their basic needs met, and instead we have sort of other priorities about war and peace and stuff like that.
Well, I know is one of the issues with Marxism, and even Karl Marx on his deathbed said this, is that the problem with it is in order to make that kind of system work, you need to have an overabundance of resource. And without that, it won't work. Even Karl Marx admitted that his idea won't work given that status. And so when it comes to food, we have enough food. We do. And the United States alone has enough food and resource, at least back in, I want to say 2005 was when I got this piece of information. So I don't know if it's still relevant. But back in about 2005, 2003 to 2005, the United States alone had enough food in reserve that it could feed the on its on the current on that the food consumption at the time. They could feed the entire world at that time for the next 5 years. So we do have the food resources, we do have the housing resources, and we do have, and the United States does have a really good medical system. Our medical professionals work very, very well. So then it is, like I said, that position of choice. So we that's where I bring up the whole mixed economy is that we want to keep capitalism because I mean you like your stuff, don't you?
I like stuff.
You don't want to, yeah, you don't want to be devoid of property and ownership. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not the type of person
Like you
who is
don't.
against private ownership for sure. I would agree with you. I think a mixed economy is good. I think that yeah, like certain things, I think the government should do more on housing, do more on healthcare for sure.
Right, and that's what mixed economy can bring
Yeah,
us is that these taxes will be divvied differently. And right now, currently, it's almost like 75% of our taxes go to military spending, and our military budget is more than the 7 countries. Was it 7 countries? 5 or 7 countries combined. We spend more than
yeah,
the next
yeah.
countries.
We spend more than most of the planet pretty much, but it's because the United States government polices the planet.
Well, we have a lot of agreements with other countries,
Mhm.
and so that plays in our benefit. Like as much as like globalism, we live in a global economy, whether we like that or not. And so like the reason why we get cheap oil prices from Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is because we have a deal with them.
Yeah.
If they want military backing, we're supposed to provide it.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, we have to have a strong military force for that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people often overlook is people who come is the military vets. We constantly talk about how we don't take care of them. If you look at a graph, I actually have it. I don't think I can pull it up at the moment, but I actually have that graph. And actually, I think I have it on my phone. I can look at it. Hold on just a minute. Let's
Mhm.
see.
Yeah, I mean, we basically, the United States is the overseer of a global economy that it benefits the most from,
Oh,
and
I
that's
got
why we
it.
have such a large military.
Yeah, the Veterans Benefits and Services, which would be a social program, is I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's the green one. It's like um
It's like 5% or something.
yeah, it's tiny.
Mhm.
It's tiny. And then you have the defense, which is like half it's a little bit over 50%. And so our social services in this country are falling way far behind any of our European allies. And it's the Burger Krieg made an interesting commentary on that. He said the United States doesn't do what most Western civilizations are expected to do. And I think that's where our shortcoming is that I don't think necessarily we need to look to social like pure socialism or pure
Mhm.
communism because those countries are not socialistic. They're mixed economies. They are um, capitalist countries. They have a capitalist backbone. They absolutely are in the business of making money, but the programs that they have to keep capitalism in check are a lot stronger. They still have crony capitalism over there,
Mhm.
but it's not as bad as in the United
Yeah.
States. And that's something I think you and I would agree on, even a
Yeah.
social justice warrior would agree with me that crony capitalism, and this is one thing I find very fascinating, is the libertarians and the right-wing people that I speak to. And then the people on the left, whether they're social justice, Marxist socialists, or an anti-authoritarian leftist like myself or a centrist,
Mhm.
seems like no matter who I talk to, everyone is sick and tired of crony capitalism and wants it to die.
Yeah, I agree with that. So,
And
and I think that
and
that
that's
brings
the
up a really interesting point because I think what's interesting is everyone has all those people you listed have a different analysis of why crony capitalism exists, and therefore they all have a different analysis of what is the solution. So to give you an example, Brazil is a good example of this. So Brazil is a country that has systemic corruption. To be a part of the governing body, you have to be corrupt. So recently, the institutions were used in a way to attack the left, who are like social democrats, to throw them out of power, and then the right wing, like the capitalist class and some other like right wing populists, align themselves to get Bolsonaro, who's like a pretty openly fascist guy, in power. So what the Marxist left would say is, crony capitalism is a enduring facet of capitalism, and even a mixed economy is not going to work because at some point the capitalists are going to align with some kind of far right movement to overthrow them so that they can make more money in the short term. So, what do you think about that? Do you think that's a correct analysis or no?
I think that sounds pretty accurate, but I think we're selling ourselves short on having this conversation with people from different political spheres on crony capitalism. There's a very interesting documentary on Netflix that I would recommend called Bleeding Edge, where they talk about this. But
Mm-hmm.
it shows you the difference between crony capitalism in America. It was called The Bleeding Edge. I don't know if I said that. and crony capitalism that happens over in the UK. See, Bayer released this contraceptive device, and it's this little T thing. I forget what they call it. Esure, that's what it's called. Bayer's Esure, and it causes massive amount. I mean, this product is nothing short of female genital mutilation. And so when they found out about it, guess what happens in the United States? You have all these lobbyists run to the rescue to go, no, 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 we're not going to ban it. We're just, there's currently, I think the last I looked, there was like over 500,000 class action lawsuits against Bayer over this contraceptive. Now, when the UK found out about it, Bayer had to pull that product out really quick because their government was going to come in and shake some cages. And they were like, oh, we can't have this product over here. Massive amounts of fines, jail time, all kinds of stuff. So they had to pull out of Europe because this type of product over in Europe, you will face major ramifications for pushing that product. But over here in the United States, it's like they keep getting slapped on the wrist,
Yeah.
but they can continue to push this product even though they know it's detrimental to people's
Yeah,
well-being.
I would say our market is definitely a bit more captured. Another thing I would say is, like, again, the UK, they have a completely nationalized healthcare system. The government runs basically everything other than a few private services. That would probably be another difference. And another thing that should be sort of brought into this discussion is, like, they're facing a major, the UK is facing a major crisis with Brexit, and they're currently trying to find a way to get a deal done. And there is a possibility that there could be no deal at all that could lead to a basically a mass deregulation of their economy, which could lead to other corporations being able to get influence there because the regulations have been removed. So,
Well, and another thing to consider too when we talk about this type of thing is well, there's two different things. There's one, population. Population density over in Europe is very, very different compared to population density in the United States. And the United States takes up a larger landmass. But the other consideration when talking about these things is oh shit, I forgot what I was going to say on that.
well, here's the thing.
I
Would
lost it.
would you agree though that there's definitely a problem in the system that the money interests in a lot of countries, they use their influence and power and capital to kind of benefit themselves at the expense of everyone else.
I think that's a problem in the country that we live in.
Well, do you think it's a problem in, like, Brazil, or like or in, like, the UK, or in some parts of Europe?
I think Brazil is at the mercy of getting a justice system that works. There's
Okay.
a lot of crime over there, and there's a lot of leaked videos that you can find of drug cartels and various gang activity that take place down there that are horrific. There was one that I even saw of a 15-year-old boy having his head cut off
Mm,
in Brazil.
yeah.
And that's really fucked up, That's
Yeah.
that's something that we would not tolerate here in the United States.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I just think that it's interesting that, again, the rich people in Brazil align themselves with this overtly fascist character, and their president elect is openly talking about bringing back dictatorship, killing people. He's anti-gay, all these things, right? So it's one thing to say we're against corruption, therefore we have someone who's anti-corrupt, but this guy's like anti, like, people.
Well, I think there's a juggling act that needs to be in play, isn't there? But so there's this interesting conundrum that happened recently with vape mods. So right now, there's a group of leftists that are attacking these, and they're saying that they appeal to children because of the flavors.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Now, then no, I would look at lobbyists, and it's like lobbying is a product of crony capitalism. Lobbying shouldn't exist. There should be nobody at Capitol Hill putting money in senators' pockets to push an agenda over it for a company, for a corporation. But it was lobbyists that ended up protecting vaping from being taken off the market, because it wasn't just the left that was attacked, just a certain segment of the left that attacked these. Not everyone on the left, obviously. A lot of leftists, I think, are vaping. So I
Yeah.
don't know that that's the entirety of it. That's another thing that I think is a problem, is we tend to polarize
Hmm.
political spectrums. Is like,
Yeah.
I support vaping. Oh, you must be right wing. No.
Yeah. There's an anti-smoking lobby, and
But it was
they fixed themselves onto vaping because smoking cigarettes in the United States is way on the decline, big time. But vaping is still kind of a thing. So
well, and big tobacco companies are attacking it as well, because they're losing a lot of money due to vaping. So it's almost like we needed lobbyists to protect us from the other lobbyists. And
yeah,
that's not free market capitalism, is it?
yeah, it's not. I mean, this is a little separate from the discussion about, like whether or not capitalism can, I feel like that's still a question that's in the air. Is like if capitalism as a system can remove those type of things like this crony capitalist ideas from it, or if that's just an inherent part of the system. And one thing that's sort of been, looking at all of these populists in a lot of different countries, that feels like a compelling argument to me. And I don't know if I've seen anything that really totally dissuades me from it. Looking at the United States, looking at other countries, I don't know. Like, do you think that there's some way to remove it from the system, like completely?
Lobbying? I'm pretty sure lobbying is unconstitutional, actually.
No, it's constitutional.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, as a matter of fact, I mean they like money in politics in the United States. I mean, you it's unlimited as long as you're a corporation. It's totally
I
unlimited.
I do know that Thomas Jefferson wanted the American people to stay away from centralized banking, because as long as we had centralized banking, we were going to be enslaved by the idea of money.
Yeah, I don't know if I
He
totally agree
wanted
with that now, but
privatized banking only, because he wanted people to be free. The way that I look at it is like, if there's a product I like, and this is what that you have this one group, okay, they look at something like this, they're like, this is bad for you. It needs to be illegal because I don't like it. And that's agenda, from my opinion, from my perspective. The way that I look at it is that this is a thing that I want to do. This is a thing that I want to participate in. This is a thing that I get joy out of. And I should be able to take my money and go and purchase and partake in this activity and ingesting this nicotine, this chemical, and this hobby. It's turned into a hobby for me, really, because now I'm getting into making my own mods and everything. But then you got this other group that's pushing back. It's not necessarily big tobacco companies. It's this group of people that are like, well, nobody should be ingesting nicotine. And it's like, but that's not your place to tell me how to live my life. Like thanks, but you're not my mom, you're not my dad. And honestly, my dad's been trying to control me for 35 years and he hasn't succeeded yet. So if you make something like this illegal, what's going to happen is it's going to create an underground market, and you're going to end up creating criminals.
yeah, that could be the
So
case.
it's like,
For sure.
where is the underlying cause? I mean, what was the underlying problem? You got this group of people that want the world ran the way that they think it should be ran. And then you have another group of people that are like, hey, you do you and let me be me. And end of story.
Yeah. I
And
would say
then
it's
you've
a
got
little more complicated than
crony.
that. I think the movement to attack smoking has been a net positive on society because smoking kills you, and the cigarette companies lied about that for decades. Sort of like the way that the oil companies have lied
I don't
about.
care if they lied about it or not.
Yeah. Well, that
I
but that
want to
makes them
vape.
legally culpable. Like that's the argument, is like when you're doing these things that harm people and you lie about it, then you can be held legally, liable for lying and doing things.
Well, the other
And
thing
yeah,
the other thing that I was going to throw into the mix is you have the lobbyists from big tobacco companies coming down going, ooh, competition. I don't want competition. I want to stomp
yeah,
competition out.
yeah, for sure.
So we're going to shovel money in people's pockets to try and make sure that these things become illegal. And it's like, what about my voice? Like, you don't if you don't like it, you don't have to participate. I don't care that it's killing me. I don't care. If you care, don't smoke, don't
Hmm.
vape. But who is anybody in this world to tell me what I can and cannot do with my life?
Yeah.
I'm not advocating for suicide or anything like that. I'm just saying I've come to realize death is a part of life. I've
Oh, for
come to
sure. Yeah.
realize
Totally agree with that.
I've come to I've come to realize that disease and all these other ailments that afflict us is a part of life, and there's no way out of it. So it's about quality of life.
Hmm.
If I'm stuck with no chemicals to stimulate the dopamine, endorphins, and norepinephrine, serotonin reuptake inhibitors in my brain, and just am subjected to the normal entertainment that normal people ingest, and I'm not entertained by it, I'm living in misery. I'm in hell. And it's like I have to do it because that's what they do and that's how they think everyone should live. Well, that's not, everybody's not the same.
Hmm.
I'm not entertained by the same things they are. I'm not stimulated by the same things they are. And I'm not just speaking for me. I'm talking on behalf of anybody who thinks this way. So you have to put yourself in this mentality of, just because somebody does something that I disagree with doesn't mean that I'm against it. I mean, if you're talking about this is what I get into that philosophy again. I believe in choices, not one's ability to impose one's will on others against their own will. It's like I made this choice to do this. This is my choice. Not you. You don't have to make the same choice as me. I would encourage you not to, in fact, but don't take away my right to make this choice. That's all
Yeah,
I'm saying.
sure.
And that ends when you like let's say that somebody gets fulfillment out of murdering. Well, you can't have that fulfillment because you're taking away someone's life. That's it. That's everything. That's the person's ability to experience love, to experience hatred, to experience pain, to experience the ability to be cognizantly aware of your own consciousness. And that's the biggest crime I think you could do to somebody, is take that away from them.
Mm.
So you can't have that right.
Yeah.
You can't rape, you can't molest, you can't abuse, you can't do those things because you are essentially opposing your will on someone else against their own will.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I
that's
I
where I say,
slightly disagree. I think, like, so there's levels to it, right? So if the government says you can't vape, and if you do, we're gonna throw you in jail. That's one level, right? If the government says, well, we've done studies and we see that vaping and smoking these other things is bad, so we're gonna like tax it, maybe have people do it less. I think that's a different level. And I definitely think that when you look at a macro level about what are the types of things that are good and bad for people in society, removing bad things, even things that people do voluntarily, like maybe say gambling or something, that's a good thing generally. And I don't think it's always totally authoritarian. But I mean, it's definitely a philosophy of, do you want people to like sort of allow themselves to
it is
do things that hurt
authoritarian whether you
themselves?
like that term. If you're telling people what they can and cannot
Well,
do, that's a type of authority.
what if I hold on? So
Even me saying,
what if I ban a company from giving payday loans that are like 10,000%? Is that authoritarian? I mean, you could say it is, right?
it is, but
I think it's good
I
for
wouldn't say
society
that
to
it's
ban them though.
incorrect.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I'm with you on that. You're basically stopping somebody from committing theft.
Well, I
That's the
wouldn't
way
say
that I see
that's
that.
not. I wouldn't say that's theft. I mean, you can charge whatever interest rate you want
100%,
theoretically.
100%. I would say anybody that would go that route is a fool.
Yeah, no, these people
But
totally they make bad choices, right? They make bad choices because they're desperate, because they're poor, because they need money immediately. And so the only people they can get it from are these payday loan people because maybe they have bad credit, right? But that gets them
and that's where
into
skepticism comes into play, is where you take something and you explain it to people like, hey, this is something that is designed to take advantage of your insecurities.
yeah,
And just because it's there doesn't mean it needs to be illegal, but making yourself aware of that's what it
yeah.
is
Well,
important.
I
And
think
that's where I see that the education system
yeah,
has
I
failed.
for me, like I said, what I care about is like what's the best way to get these people who have needs, right? They need money before they can get their paycheck because they have to pay for something, right? How do we best allow them to do that without getting them into a cycle of debt that can basically spiral them into, you know, worse poverty or worse indebtedness? So, right. So if
Why don't we create industrial growth? Why don't we legalize marijuana and create jobs so that they can actually have, and a livable wage
yeah,
is needed? Because let's face it, did you know 58% of Americans live in basically what is federally considered at or below poverty level?
hmm
58% of
yeah,
Americans
I didn't
to
know that.
happen too, and Trump isn't doing anything about it. This is an actual thing that's happening. He has actually, to his credit, lowered the amount of people on SSI, decreased the amount of people on food stamps. More people have jobs, less people are looking for jobs. So that is added to his credit. But here's the problem. All those jobs are low income jobs. And with inflation about to hit, because prices are about to skyrocket, especially with the myth that we just had with Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, so the oil prices, gas prices are going to suck. With everybody on this kind of wage scale, we're screwed. And so one of the left tactics is to say, well, let's increase minimum wage. The problem with that is that creates inflation. There's another leftist idea, though, from an economist. He was actually Bill Clinton's economic advisor, professed that what we need to do to anytime America has gotten out of an economic slump, because we're still in one. We've been in one since George W. Bush Jr., and we haven't gotten out yet. You know, America has gotten into an economic slump, how we've gotten out is through industrial growth. And right now, opportunity has been knocking on the door for a while. The majority of the United States wants to see marijuana legalized. And what that will do if we do it is it will create industry in medical science, in clothing, and food manufacturing, in farming. You're going to need people to grow the females and the males separately. It will produce coffee houses like smoke shops, uh, shops that are dedicated to smoking utensils, shops that are dedicated to selling. And I'm not talking about just medical legalization. I mean recreational too, federally across the board. This will create jobs, and thus you avoid the impending inflation. We don't have to raise the minimum wage, and you have less people on SSI.
Yeah.
And I've been on SSI. It's not a
Mhm.
place you want to be. It
Sure.
sucks.
Yeah.
It is the pits.
So just one last point I was making on the sort of the what do they call it, like the payday loan stuff, is like so we have a slate of type of things that we can address, like the problems you're talking about, like unemployment, inflation, people's wages being stagnant. So what we know is like if we either ban them or drastically restrict the amount of interest that these people can put on loans, it gives poor people more money, and so that's like giving them more power. It's actually helping them, right? So in a great
Well, and
in a
that's why we
just
want to keep
yeah,
like rate low.
in a just world, we'd be able to legalize marijuana. We'd be able to do other job programs. Unfortunately, like that's
But
the
do you
administration isn't
understand
doing that.
by making something like this illegal, you're going to be taking jobs away from people that they enjoy doing.
Yeah,
And that's
well,
what I mean is
so
when
here's
we're
the thing though.
talking about restrictions,
So like if we
you got to
put
be
payday
careful
loan
what you restrict.
people if we put payday loan people out of business, it's probably good for the economy. Like that's just the truth because then more people are going to have more money because they're not going to be taking loans from people that are charging like
I
hundreds of
got a
percent.
different idea. I got a different idea. As opposed to putting them out of business, why don't we keep them in business so they can continue to have their jobs? But why don't we put a regulation on how high an interest rate can be, which
Yeah,
I do
they've done that
believe
too. Yeah.
is a thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So what's actually
And
I
that's
think
done deliberately.
the best solution would be to have the government be able to give low interest loans to people in these same types of situations. That would actually be probably the best solution because they could basically do the same thing, just get it from the government and not be charged insane interest rates. Charge a
Well,
normal interest rate, and you'd be
there
able
to
to get it
me
at the post
to,
office. You'd be able to get your loan at a post office.
to,
So
to
I think
me
that would be
there
the
I
best
don't know.
situation.
How much do you trust how much I have a question for you on that. How much do you trust the government to get it right?
Well, I've had federal loans for student loans, and um, I mean it's relatively fine. I
You're lucky.
lobbyist stuff comes into play there as well, like you were talking about, because there's been a lot of people like basically lobbyists came in and they said, okay, so student when people get student loans, they can't go bankrupt on them. That's a problem, right? Um, so yeah, those other things come into play, but I think it's better than someone getting, uh, taking exorbitant profit on someone that is detrimental to the economy for poor people.
I want to tell you, I applied for federal student loans and I was declined.
Yeah, you might be lucky.
They said that I don't know. I don't know that I was lucky. What I was lucky in is that I had a mood disorder and I could fall under SSI, SSDI. So they put me on disability, and I told them I don't want to be on disability. And they said, well, that's a good thing. But they did that because SSI and SSDI would make it so that the SRS would pay for my way through college. And that's what ended up happening. But as soon as I could get off of SSI, SSDI, I did because I mean that was literally I got only $650 a month.
Oh,
Try and live
yeah.
off of that.
Yeah, that's pretty
No,
bad.
I
Live
wouldn't.
off that and go to
Yeah, I
school?
wouldn't.
Yeah,
I
that
wouldn't
sounds rough.
recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it sucked. It sucked. There was many nights of me just staring at my ceiling.
Yeah.
Um,
So one last thing I do want to talk
many.
about is sort of like sort of the free speech debate as it's taken place on like platforms like YouTube and Facebook and Google. So recently, Apple they had I think Tim Cook made a speech where he said like people that preach hate, white supremacists will never be allowed on Google's like platform for applications. And basically what that's meant is people like Alex Jones or people like I don't know, like maybe Richard Spencer or whoever are permanently banned from those type of platforms. So do you think that this is a good thing or do you think it's a bad thing?
I think it's a bad thing because what you're doing is you're isolating them into an echo chamber where they become radicalized and extremist. They're not introduced to a free market exchange of ideas where they will be pitted against people who have differing ideas to their own that will criticize them and try to challenge them to think a different way.
Yeah, that's it. I definitely would say I used to believe that. So I think that there's a difference. So one thing we should talk about is there's definitely a difference between Apple and Google bans people from their platform and the government throws Alex Jones in jail because of 9/11 conspiracies. So I'm not in favor of people like Alex Jones or racists being thrown in jail because they say racist things in the United States, at least. Not in favor of that. I think that the current auspice that we have, where these platforms are private, they're owned privately, and therefore they can kind of set their own rules. is just kind of the way it is. I think it's fine. The only alternatives that I see to
I
it
think that's
is
another number of crony capitalism right
to
there
me,
for you. They have too
yeah.
much power.
The only so if you're someone who believes that these companies should allow anyone on their platform, I think there's one or two things that would have to happen. Number one, there would have to be some type of legislation federally that basically holds them to a First Amendment standard, or they have to be nationalized. You'd have to nationalize Google, Facebook, Yahoo, Apple, whoever, right? Um,
Right.
I don't like nationalizing them. The first one I guess could work, I guess, but
I like the idea of applying the First Amendment rights to cyberspace. I absolutely am I'm a big fan of that idea.
yeah, I think that would be okay. um,
Because
because
that's the way I look at this. This is like a public space where we come and we communicate
yeah,
ideas. And really, debunking the alt-right is very, very easy. Their argument starts to fall apart at the very beginning because we look at things like the Human Genome Project, and when you look at genetics, there is no such thing as race as far as genetics are concerned. No such thing.
hmm
So their argument starts to fall flat on its face from the very get-go. And also when we look at biological science, uh, human beings have the lowest genetic diversity than any other animal in the animal kingdom. And what we learn from observing nature is that creatures with higher genetic variance have a higher probability and likelihood of survival. Richard Spencer's ludicrous idea of creating this ethno-state. So he's going to gather these white people of various IQ levels and physical attributes that he's looking for and just put them there, and they're just going to reproduce over and over. They're isolating their genetic variants to this little circle. So they're only going to reproduce within there. What you're going to end up with is isolating from the genetic pool. You're going to end up with people that have birth defects. They're going to be intellectually inept. Um, you're going to have all kinds of genetic problems because of that. And so that's an argument that just falls flat on its face. Any geneticist, any biologist that can speak on the YouTube platform could confront Richard Spencer or Baked Alaska or Stephen Molyneux or any of those alt-right shitheads and say, this just isn't going to work. And I mean, just getting right back down to even the Human Genome Project, we're all 99.9% genetically alike. There's only a 0.01% genetic ratio
yeah, for
between
sure.
any given human being. Even
Mhm.
between you and I, there's only going to be, and within that 0.01%, it's going to tell it that's genetic information that's going to say hair color you have, what skin tone you might have, what eye color you may have, etc. These are only visibly observable characteristics.
Mhm.
But genetically, we're pretty much we're the same.
Yeah.
That like I mean, a lot of the times I like to look at this in terms of like cats because I love cats. I just love them. Cats are my favorite animal. And between a tiger and a domesticated house cat, there's like a 49% genetic variance. They have huge gap. The older a species is, the more genetic variance you're going to have. So prokaryotes actually have more of a genetic variance than human beings do, than two different human beings. But so like we just look at the domestic house cat, let's say. The domestic house cat has a plethora of different breeds. Okay. And there's like a um I don't remember what the genetic variance is between like a tabby and a Mancoon, but it's like 50-60%, something like that. If you take two tabby cats, let's say a tortoiseshell tabby and an orange-haired tabby cat, they're both the same breed, but they're two different colors. They're going to have a genetic variance about 49%. Then you have human beings. we're even between you and I, it's only 0.01% genetic variance. So we're not even talking about different breeds of people. We're all one species. Even Sam Harris has professed this. We are all one species, and we all are descendants of Adam. The thing that gives us different genetic traits has predominantly to do with the terrain and how close we are to the equator.
Mhm.
If we live close to the ocean, if we live close to a river, if we lived in the plains, or something like that. That's where we get these physical attributes, and they're only visually observable and nothing more.
Yeah, I
They
definitely
are not.
I totally agree with you on that. And yeah, I do think that like these arguments are easily dispelled. I think the problem is like I think thinking of the marketplace of ideas as a market where the best product wins out is probably not the best way to think about it. I think the reality, someone said this recently, and I think it's pretty accurate, is like it's more like a potluck of ideas where people bring stuff, and then there's some people that bring a lot of something, like, and those things could be really bad. But then if the marketplace is flooded with that stuff, so like imagine, we bring our ideas, and our ideas are like chicken and fish, and then these alt-right people come and they bring cockroaches, and they just more of them come with cockroaches and cockroaches, and then at a certain point we're overwhelmed and we just leave, and then the whole marketplace is flooded with cockroaches, right?
But
um
then they win. They win if you do that.
yeah,
You
well,
don't back down.
they don't
You
really win,
go
like they
out of your
the point is that there's more of
go
them.
out of your way to piss them off.
Yeah,
Piss
there's
them off.
no
Piss
there.
Richard Spencer off.
Yeah, well, I mean, his arguments have always
That's
been
the
bad.
aspect of free speech, though.
Yeah, his arguments have always been bad, and like the platforms made him bigger, and then they went to Charlottesville and they killed someone, right? One of the biggest white supremacist rallies, in decades.
They didn't kill someone. There was an ensuing brouhaha that led up to somebody dying. But yes, and that was a shame.
Well, I mean, James
Richard
feel
Spencer
like
actually does not condone that.
I think that's a pretty
But
bad defense of like Richard. Have you seen the movie American History X? Have you ever seen that movie?
yeah, I've seen that
Yeah,
movie.
yeah. So like, there's a part where Danny Vineyard comes back from prison, right? And so then he's kind of angry and he confronts his like older white supremacist guy mentor, and the guy tells him, "Oh, I knew that you weren't always going to want to be the skinhead who goes in and attacks people in a convenience store. Now we have a different role for you where you're going to be intelligent and presentable." Like, they work hand in hand. The presentable people like Richard Spencer work hand in hand with the James Fields who do the actual violence. But make no mistake about it, like he knows that it's a violent movement. He's putting on a face to make it acceptable. He knows that his project is about using ethnic violence against people he is othered. It's the total end result.
Right, and he.
I don't think he's legally culpable.
But
I
he's
agree with
also
that.
praying. Well, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
That's what I'm getting at.
but he's
No,
fomenting a movement that is violent. It is
the murder.
inherently violent.
I mean, so was Jim Jones.
Sure. Yeah. Um, I just think that it's a
And
little
he
bit
was a
more.
socialist.
Yeah, it's a little bit more dangerous when you have these people and they get sort of tacit acceptance from the president, where he says, "Oh, well, there were bad people on both sides," and it's like, holy shit. It's a little bit
Well,
worse.
Antifa is a bad group. Antifa is a bad group.
Yeah.
I don't agree with the strategy of violence.
So here's the problem.
Violence is not the answer.
Let me give you a great example of, and I agree with that. Violence isn't the answer. So I'll give you a great example. So there was a black church that did a counter protest against the Charlottesville rally. They got surrounded by fascists. Surrounded, okay? And then Antifa came and they fought the Nazis off. So, I mean, like, imagine a world where the black protesters get attacked by white supremacists. Like, are we just going to say, oh, well, that's okay, it just happened? But in reality, the
No,
anti-fascists came in and they used violence to prevent anything that could have happened to them. Does that make them wrong to
but
have attacked these fascists? I don't know. It becomes
no,
more and
no,
morally
they
gray,
they
right?
they probably police.
Well, here's a good thing. So the police totally fucked up, totally fucked, and there's a lot of like this person Sean and Jen. I think he just goes by Sean now. I'll send you the video. He did a great video analysis of how the police totally fucked up. So the police basically what they did was they allowed people to fight each other. They allowed people to fight each other. They allowed all kinds of crazy shit to go on, and that was really bad because it led to a lot of conflict. So they were derelict in their duty. And again, this is kind of why Antifa exists. It's like when the cops fail and people that they want to protect, like the black churchgoers, need to be protected, they will use violence to protect them from fascists, right?
Okay.
So, but that's their whole justification for existing. I mean, definitely there's mission creep, right? I would agree with you on that. Um, I guess the point I'm making is like there's definitely cases where, first off, like these type of ideas lead to stuff like Charlottesville. Like that's the end result. They want to push this type of agenda into public, and it's violent. It's inherently violent. And there's a difference, I think, between people who are just like kind of have a normal discourse and people who are deliberately lying and deliberately creating
But
false
that
narratives.
goes back to my advocacy of not like getting to the point of where they're getting radicalized and becoming extremists in their eye view. And that's dangerous no matter where you go. Like Antifa, the alt-right, Jim Jones, any cultist group that where you have this herd mentality, it starts to become dangerous when you leave yourself not open to the prospect of different ideas. And that's what I mean. It's like when we're talking about free speech, it's like, okay, so Richard Spencer has the freedom to spew his bullshit,
Yeah, totally.
but
And I
I
totally agree
also
with
have
that.
the freedom to go and call him a piece of shit. I have that
Yeah.
freedom. But if you start infringing on freedom of speech, you're taking that ability away. Because still, in the United States, regardless of what people think, regardless of what the motivation is behind the crime, beating, raping, murdering, these things are illegal. And they're
Yeah.
illegal for a reason.
Yeah. So
And I
one
think
thing,
that's a shame. I think that's a shame that the police fucked that
oh, they
up.
they fucked up big
They
time. Yeah.
should have been there for those people. They should have been there for those people. And yes, I would agree that there is need for reform in our justice system because of issues just like you mentioned. I don't think a group of communist anarchist vigilantes is the answer. I think the answer
They
is saying
yeah they
police force, you need to do your job.
yeah they're not the hero that we want, but they're the hero that we get. Sometimes it's just the reality of the situation. I mean,
Well, that doesn't mean that I have to
yeah.
like it.
No one has to like it, but I'll tell you who does like it: the people who would have been beaten and attacked by fascists on that day, who weren't because Antifa came and they used violence to stop them. So someone has to think about them too, right? And that's kind of like why I want to make
Well,
sort of make
that
a
that, that
case for.
sounds that sounds that sounds kind of like an appeal to a motive force to me. I don't
Well,
think
I don't.
either side on that is correct in their actions.
Well, of
I'm
course
not
they,
talking about the people from the church.
but
I'm talking about
like
Antifa
you
and
you
the alt-right.
you the main thing you said is like you don't want the marketplace of ideas to be taken over by fascists, right? That someone should engage them and counter protest. That's
Yes,
exactly what they
yes.
did, and they were met by not by ideas but by violence from fascists.
Not physical
By
protest,
well, but they were met by
mental.
violence, and this is I think what a lot of people on the left point out is like these fascists don't care about ideas of free speech and free ideas and like public squares of protest. They want to take things over, and they are willing to use force to do it. And the only thing that they answer to is opposing force.
And I know libertarians, and I know a specific gun rights activist that would say this is why we need to keep guns in place, but I'm not going there.
Yeah,
I'm not going to have that debate.
yeah. I think
But
Charlottesville I just think Charlottesville is a
I know
good
several gun
example of like
activists that make that point.
how like in reality these types of groups they're not just about presenting their ideas. They want to do propaganda, and then they want to use violence to make sure that their ideas come out on top.
Oh, so is Antifa though. They're mirror images of each other.
I think that's a false equivalence, but I I don't know. I guess that's kind of, but I don't see any like
That's
Antifa does
ultimately where I got the idea that
did it does
that anarchy will not work, is because human beings are inherently violent.
but like when has
Yeah, I mean,
Antifa
there's
done
so
a
many people out
rally?
there.
When has Antifa done a rally similar to Charlottesville?
Antifa went to a, a seminar in Texas where a speaker was going to talk about they were prevailing free speech, right? So that they were saying, I want free speech. Antifa, the black bloc, shows up to try and shut them down. They didn't realize until they got there that the person giving this speech was a Latino American, and they ended up getting in a fight and ended up pissing off a member of a gang. And that was interesting for a while. That was kind of like a sit on the edge of your seat and go, ooh, this is going to be interesting. What's going to happen next? They ended up resolving their differences, but they had no idea that they would be entering in a position. And actually, I believe the National Guard was there to protect the speaker. They didn't know that this person was not an alt-right figure. They were just an average, ordinary American citizen speaking to preserve the freedom of speech.
Yeah, but
And then you have Antifa showing up
you're
trying to
using
shut
this
them down.
as an analogy of something similar to Charlottesville.
Well,
I don't really see
I'm
those two as analogies.
saying you have people that have been bashed in the head, that have been hit with bike lock chains, that
Yeah,
have had flaming trash cans rolled at. Antifa even was responsible for destroying an outreach center, which would be, you would think that they would be for. They damaged it.
yeah. But
They
again,
vandalized
none of
it.
these things are really analogous to white supremacists show up. One of them runs a person over and kills them. Many more people are injured. A guy got caught by a black guy got caught by three white supremacists in a parking lot, got beat like very close to dying. Another guy fired.
I'm not okay with any of it.
Yeah, that's. But I'm not saying that
I'm
you are.
not okay with Antifa. I'm not okay with the alt-right.
My point is like I don't think these are analogous. I don't think these are at all equivalent. Like nothing that you've said that Antifa has done is equal to this rally where they killed someone, attempted to kill many others, and if it weren't for other people who
Is killing violence.
is killing
Is
violence.
killing violence.
Yes, it's
Yes.
yeah.
Is hitting somebody in the head with a bike lock chain violence.
Yeah, totally. I would not put those two in the same category at all.
But let me give you my original argument, my original stance.
Attack for sure, but they're not equivalent.
I
So
am against violence.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm against the person who murdered, obviously, but I'm also against somebody hitting someone in the face with a bike lock chain. They didn't even know who the person
Yeah,
was. That
I
person
am
wasn't an alt-right anything.
I am too. Like I don't actually that person went to the school that I went to, ironically. All that Berkeley stuff happened like right in my neck of the woods. So I actually went to the second um Battle of Berkeley where nothing happened, but there was some interesting conversations there. But the point I'm trying to make is that they're not equal. Antifa is not as violent as these alt-right actors. They're just not. They have killed people, they have severely injured other people, and they have attempted to do even more violence if it wasn't for these people who get maligned Antifa, which isn't to say that they're good. It's to say that they're not the same, and the right wing is far more violent by their nature, and they're far more dangerous, and they need to be treated differently. And there needs to be actions, basically by the government, the federal government, to disband them and arrest them and put them in prison.
That I would say would be the correct answer, is that they need to get the alt-right under control if they are participating in violence. But beyond Charlottesville, and I mean, you have some like scattered cases here and there, it doesn't seem like it's an organized effort. It seems like these individuals get locked into an echo chamber, probably thanks to social media, and they become radicalized and extremist, and they go out and they commit an act on their own behalf. That seems to be predominantly what ends up happening. Now, the alt-right rallies in which we speak of violent activities seem to be very, very minute. In fact, I would say I think people that subscribe themselves in that category is only like 500,000 people out of the entirety of the United States.
Not a
It's
lot.
a tiny fringe group. And then you look at something like Antifa, and they're huge. And it's like, well, I don't really think either group is in the right. I don't think either group should be banned from social media, but I don't think anybody has the right to go and commit violence, whether it be murder or punching, hitting, throwing flaming trash cans at a crowd of people. I
Yeah.
don't think anybody has the right to do that,
So
because you are inflicting
yeah,
a problem on you are imposing your will on someone else against their
yeah.
own will.
Well, I think one thing,
If
like so for there's been a lot of in the last, basically since Trump started running, there's been a lot of far right wing violence. There was a guy at an event with in Washington State, pulled out a gun and shot some people. Um, in Oregon, I think the police found a stash of guns that white supremacists were going to use to attack an event. There have been many attempted like bombings and other things. There was this group that they started, they called the Atomwaffen in Southern California. One of their members, one of his ex-classmates who was a gay Jewish guy, he fucking killed him. Um, so I still haven't heard, one murder perpetuated by Antifa, but the far right wing white supremacists in the United States have done massive amounts of violence, massive amounts of murders. There's a guy in New York, white supremacist, alt-right guy, was walking down the street. The first black person he saw, he shot him and killed him. He was going to kill more, and then he just turned himself into the police. So to me, they are far worse. They are far more insidious, and they are far more violent. And I don't think the two are equivalent. And I've never yet heard a case of them being equivalent, because they're not. I don't know.
when I say they're equivalent, I mean they're equivalent in ideology. They both they both participate in identity collectivism.
Okay,
Do you understand?
but the alt right is vastly more violent. They're vastly more violent. So
I
that
think they're both violent.
yeah, but the alt right's killed way more people. They've killed way more people. They've killed more people. They've done more violence. They've done more harm to people. They've destroyed more. Well, I don't know if they've destroyed more property. Probably not. But they're like, if we care about people's lives, like the alt right is far worse.
Well, that's bringing into question morality. So we have to look at a moral compass and say, like, is bashing somebody in the head worse than killing a person? Of course, most rational people are going to say, of course, killing a person is worse than bashing them in the face. But what I'm specifically looking at is the violent rate in general, just violence. And I think that should be tolerated. I mean, you have the right to protest, you have the right to assemble, but what you do, like if I was in the position, let's say I was coming out of the church, and just speaking from like how I think, my own personality, because that's all I can do at this point. If I was in that situation where, like, the church is surrounded by these alt-right fascists, and they're angry, they're an angry mob of people, um, I'm gonna leave. Like, fuck the church. I'm out. I'm gone. I'm leaving. I'm not gonna
Well,
be a part of
weren't
this.
you saying that you don't think that
And that would be
square
my
be
reaction to it.
conceded? Wasn't that what you're saying? Like the public square shouldn't be conceded when extremists from people that have moderate views should enter the public square and debate them?
Well, I would debate them, but I'm not going to fight them. If they're looking to fight, I'm going to walk away. I'm going to be like, no, I'm going to leave and
Well,
not
I
fight.
mean, they would be coming to fight you. Like you're not trying to fight them; they're trying to fight you because they don't like your identity, right?
Yeah, and I hightail it and leave. I've never been in a situation that I couldn't get out of. I mean, that's a weird anomaly to me. I suppose there are examples out there where like violent atrocities have happened, like the shooting that happened at the arena. That was actually done by a leftist. It wasn't an Antifa member, but he was a leftist. He opened fired on a lot of Republicans, shot a lot of people. It was a concert, I believe. Um, and
Hmm.
and so like anybody that was shot in that scenario, they didn't know it was coming, so there's probably no way to evacuate, and probably many people did evacuate. Actually, they probably just lunged towards the exit doors. But I mean, when you approach a group of people that actively are alt-right, I mean, they're going to be waving those stupid swastikas, and they have their symbols and
Hmm.
all that sort of stuff. You know what they are. And it's like, well, they've got baseball bats and guns in their hand. I'm out. I'm not going to partake in that. Like, they're not looking to have a debate. They're looking for violence. And it's like,
Yeah.
protect yourself. Get out of that situation. Run away. Get out of
Hmm.
there. Call the police.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I
And
mean, I
that's where
wouldn't
I
want
say,
to.
and
I wouldn't want to be in that situation at all, personally. I definitely
nobody
think
does.
I definitely
Nobody
think
does.
like the person who's at fault obviously are these far right wing, alt right people for attacking churchgoers, right? Who are just counter protesting them. And I guess again, my point is like these people they have no interest in a open exchange of ideas. I mean, Antifa doesn't either. But the far right they're using violence, and they use violence at a far higher rate. I guess is my argument why they're worse, and that Antifa, while being something that we can
And
probably
that's a moral argument. It's a moral judgment. You're saying that they're more
yeah.
dangerous because they've taken a life rather than just hitting. And
Well,
I see where you're coming
I
from on
think if
that. I
you if
really
you
do.
if you have a scale where you put what both of them have done, there's more total violence on the alt right side, and more potential violence, like things where we stop them from hurting people or killing people, where they attempted to, and luckily the police got to them first or whatever. I think it's a false equivalence to say, okay, well, Antifa, like theoretically, their ideas are also violent, but they're not as violent in reality. But the alt right is way more violent in reality, even if I guess we're going to say their ideology is comparable.
I'm not putting them on a scale like that. I'm not saying they're more violent because of this. I just see them as both being very extremist, very radicalized, violent groups. Both of them. You could tell me, well, the alt-right killed someone, they've only hit somebody. Well, that's interesting, but they're still both very radical, very extremist, very violent groups. Both of them.
Yeah. So
And I
you're
don't
not
agree
willing.
with
You're
either
not
side.
willing to say that the alt right is worse, or the alt right far right is worse.
I'll say this, I hate the alt-right more.
Okay. Well, that's fair. I mean, I'm not trying to like do it get you or anything, but to me, I
I
think it's
can
pretty.
more I can identify as an individual with Antifa than I can with the alt-right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
dislike the alt-right more than I dislike Antifa.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I
equally,
understand.
I perceive them.
Hmm.
Okay.
I understand. Like, I totally get it. Like, I think that makes sense. That perspective has validity, and I think there's a lot of people who kind of feel that way. Yeah, it's just for me, like seeing Charlottesville and like some of these other like white supremacists coming out of the woodwork because they're using these platforms to sort of make connections with people, and then they're getting people like James Fields, like was a pretty out there guy. He was not totally 100% like there, and he was basically easily manipulated into doing this kind of violence. And actually, something just came out recently where he was sharing this meme of people getting run over by a car before he run people over with a car. So there's kind of an intention there. Like, these people, they spread this type of violence, this type of violent rhetoric, these violent ideas, and they're playing them out in real life, which I think is why, again, why they're actively worse. Like, violence is a part of their ideology. They want to violently enforce their ideas on society. So
And that's what I'm saying. Antifa and the alt-right activity. Now, yes, okay, the alt-right have murdered people, and Antifa has not, but they both engage in that strategy of violence to get what I want. Yes.
yeah. Well, I think the alt right is worse because first off, they're not trying to. So like Antifa is like basically a defensive type of group. Their main philosophy is to defend people from certain things, whether they be white supremacist or people they deem racist or people they deem
They have a
other.
political agenda. They,
Yeah,
they
I
have
mean
a
they're
political agenda.
they're mostly anarchists and socialists and leftists. Yeah, for sure. Totally agree with you there. The alt right, their
But
philosophy is white identitarianism, and in order to infuse and create a ethno state, they are willing to and want to openly use violence to um, basically remove the people that they see as not being a part of their nation, whether they be racially or ethnically or sexually the wrong type of person. And they want to remove them with force. So to me, like even on
and
a
they're
philosophical
not
level,
they're
they are
not
different.
going to get it. They're not going to get it because we live in a secularist society.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
I mean, yeah,
Period.
yeah, it
But
will not happen. They will fail. They failed many times. They failed in Germany. They failed, wherever they've tried this type of white supremacy, it's failed. And it's basically a death cult. But that doesn't stop them from organizing and killing people and brutally harming people in the meantime, right? So that's kind of the issue is like, that's another thing is like, should Charlottesville have even been allowed to happen? Um, I don't know. I mean,
like I
you could,
said, you have the right to assemble, you have the right to protest, but what you
yeah,
don't have the right to do is inflict violence upon others.
yeah,
So
yeah,
when the
yeah,
moment they inflict violence upon others, they are no longer abiding the laws.
yeah.
When those laws are in place, those are laws that I would that is a form of authoritarianism that protects us from authoritarianism.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one thing we can agree on. I think that's basically all I wanted to cover. I think it's been a good discussion.
I
Is there
think you
any?
and I think you and I would actually agree that our justice system does need a reform, because if they're not doing something about whether it be Antifa being violent towards others or the alt-right being violent towards others, they need to do something about that.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely I don't like Antifa's tactics. I don't agree with them. I've sort of like understand why they exist in the sense that there are things like when Charlottesville happens, there needs to be some kind of resistance to protect people that are counter protesting. But yeah, I think anyone who does violence should be put in prison and they should be held accountable for their crimes. And Antifa has been. The people in Antifa who, Black Lock guy, he's in jail. Um, so are a bunch of other people that got caught doing things. Um, but yeah, again, I just think that the right is a little bit worse. Just like the Proud Boys, right? Proud Boys is another example. Some Antifa people
What have
showed
the
up at
Proud
a
Boys done?
Well, some Antifa people showed up at a Proud Boys meeting and they resisted the Antifa people by beating the fucking shit out of them. So, and then the people who beat the shit out of them, like they they got some harsh sentences, the Proud Boys, and basically that led to the FBI listing them as a gang, I believe, and then they disbanded. The person who created them quit the organization.
That's another aspect is self-defense. You have the right to defend yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to say, like, when it comes to Antifa or the alt-right, I don't find fear in myself of either one of those groups. I look at them as kind of nonsense. I'm like primitive people that haven't evolved with the rest of us. That's how I perceive it. That's how I perceive violence in general. Violence is merely the primitive reaction to that which you cannot control. And I have
Yeah,
yet to
yeah.
meet anybody that can prove
Um,
otherwise.
yeah, I don't.
Even in self-defense, it
Mhm.
is still the primitive reaction to that which you cannot control.
Sure, yeah, yeah. I just think that, like, it makes sense if you're a person who's, you know, a minority. Like if you're a Jew, right? This type of rhetoric is a little bit different for you because there's more of a targeted violence that befalls you because of this type of rhetoric that's out there, right? So like the guy who shot up the synagogue in Pittsburgh, he's on Gab talking about basically the Jewish question and these other very anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Now, is denying him a platform going to prevent him from doing violence? I don't know. But
You know,
yeah.
actually, that was interesting what happened on Gab because he did it on Gab instead of Twitter or Facebook or YouTube. Because YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter would have knocked his channel off or knocked
Mm-hmm.
his profile off and deleted it, gone. But because he did it on Gab, on a free speech platform, and I don't know if you know about the origins of Gab, but Gab was not created to be a space for alt-right. They just flocked there
Yeah,
because
they
it
took it
was a
over.
free speech platform.
They took it over. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But because he did that on Gab, Gab actually archived everything and handed it over to the police.
Yeah. I mean,
Did you
Twitter
know
would have
that?
done that too. Like any other, like anything that's on the internet is there forever, basically. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's just an interesting question because, like, yeah, some people they feel the effects of this type of rhetoric and these people being out there differently because they're more of a
But
target.
see, if he had done it on YouTube, there's so many different ideas out here on YouTube. Somebody would have brought this guy's the attention of this guy. That they would have brought it to the police, the proper authorities. But because it was happening on Gab, because he got pushed off of the major social media platforms due to his views,
Mm-hmm.
he gets isolated on an app that's really, quite frankly, not very popular.
Yeah,
And
it's pretty fringe. Yeah.
you know, there's all these alt-right people. It's an alt-right like echo chamber there anymore.
Yes.
In fact, the Amazing Atheist stopped using Gab because of that reason. He's like, I go over to Twitter and it's nothing but social justice warriors whining at me about everything being a microaggression. I go over to Gab and it's nothing but a bunch of alt-right racist shitheads.
Yeah.
And so he's like, you can't win.
Well, that's kind of something to be
But he
said
left
for,
Gab
like,
for that
again,
reason.
the it's not really a marketplace of ideas. It's like if a bunch of people bring, you know, alt right ideas, sometimes it can flood the market and then everyone else kind of leaves, right?
Well, we shouldn't leave.
Yeah, I don't know.
We
I don't think
shouldn't
I ever
leave.
want to go on Gab and like like for my mental well-being, is being called the N-word every day, is that good for me mentally? I don't know. I don't know if I want to
Only
subject
if you
myself to
let
that.
it. Only if you let it. Words will only have power if you give it to them. I did a little
Yeah,
social
I don't know.
experiment
I
with this
think
on
I
my
think
Facebook.
I think if you get called the N-word every day over and over and over again, and you have to read that, I think it would have a bad effect.
Well,
Just
I went on my
regardless of like what effect you want it to have on you.
well, I don't know. I asked people to flat out come forward and call me a faggot. I was like, call me a faggot. See if you can offend me. Do everything in your power to try to offend me. And nobody could do it because I will not allow that word to offend me. I just won't.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's
And I
yeah.
mean, they're actually when in one of the counter protests to of the Westboro Southern Baptist Church, they love to spew out that word faggot. They love it.
Yeah. Yeah. They do.
And one of the responses to that was to point at them and say, "Hey, that's Mr. Faggot to you."
That's pretty funny.
It's a it's a smart ass remark that they're not going to have a comeback to. You're
Yeah.
owning it. You're like, yeah, I'm a faggot. What of it? I'm
Yeah.
proud of it. What the fuck do you want?
So I think I'll just end it. I'll just give you a quick story about Dave Rubin from myself personally, and then I'll give you the last word. Say whatever you want. So Dave Rubin came to Berkeley a while back. It was probably last year, I think. And so I decided I wanted to go and ask him a question, right? So I went to UC Berkeley. I asked him about. So I said, hey, I used to be a really big fan of yours, and then you kind of started having on people like Mike Cernovich and Stefan Molyneux that I thought were not great. And I think, hey, you should talk to ContraPoints and Sam Cedar and these other people that I think are interesting left wing people. And so I asked him that question, and basically, I then talked to him personally, like after the event, and told him like why don't you debate Sam Cedar? You've been like kind of ducking him for like 2 years, and he was like, well, Sam Cedar's an asshole. I don't ever want to talk to him. So like, okay, whatever. And so that was actually like up on his YouTube channel. And then for some reason, he decided to edit out the Q&A portion of that event where I asked him a question. And then I saw him again, and I asked him like, well, you're all about free speech, but why did you edit out this portion of the Q&A section of this video? And then he said, oh, well, I didn't totally get rid of it. It's you have to subscribe to my Patreon, right? So I had someone look, and the Q&A is not there either. Like the question that I asked him that was up on his channel is completely gone, right? It's completely gone. He totally edited it out of existence. And he did that on purpose, I think, because he doesn't want people to see he doesn't want to see him confronted by left-wing people that are intelligent for some reason. And I find this kind of weird and hypocritical, and that's when I really sort of felt differently about him. Is like, oh, he's blatantly doing these things, and it's an echo chamber. Like he exists in an echo chamber that's like he'll only talk to people that are either right-wing or former left-wing people, or people that hate identity politics, which that's fine if that wants to be his niche, but he has no interest in talking to or debating actual left-wing people that can present a reasonable case for left-wing ideas. And that's to me the reason why I find him intrinsically disingenuous, because I felt it personally. Like he personally like wanted to remove that part where I talked to him because it made him look bad or something. I don't
He
know.
personally let you down.
Sort of. Well, so sometimes people like kind of reveal themselves, and that was kind of a revealing moment for him where he was like showed that he, number one, he lied about it. Like you cannot find anywhere the question that I asked him. And number two, he did it in the first place when he talks about like having open exchange of ideas and free speech and all this other stuff. But it's not really about that. It's not. For him, it's about becoming more popular, making more money, sucking up to people that are more famous than him becoming more famous. And cool, that's fun. But it's not about ideas. It's not. He has no interest in ideas. He's just like a
No,
pseudo
so
libertarian.
he's worried about his image then.
Oh yeah, he's super worried about his image. Yeah, big time. He's big time worried about his
Well,
image.
but the thing that was getting under my skin with the Sam Cedar thing, the majority report, was that they weren't really discussing why he like any of this stuff that you just brought to my attention. That would have been a fair argument to be made. Instead, it's just, well, he's a piece of shit, this and that and the other. It's just ad hominem after ad hominem. And it's like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not an argument. You're not proving any point. You're just sitting there trashing him, just bad mouthing him.
Yeah, I think
And
I
it's like, if
think
you really want to make,
they're a bit more of like a comedy, like so they kind of go at him. And they have a history. Him and Michael Brooks and Dave Rubin kind of have a history too. But I think his essential argument was that Dave Rubin doesn't understand how anti-gay Ben Shapiro is. He doesn't understand it. And the other thing is that Dave Rubin doesn't care because for him, this type of bigotry doesn't affect him. And so therefore he can easily overlook it and platform people like Ben Shapiro and give them an audience and basically help him be seen as legitimate.
okay. But the one thing that stuck out to me was that I don't know if you caught this in that little interview that he did. I don't think he does debates. I think he does interviews. But in the little interview that he did with Ben Shapiro, when about the cake,
Mm-hmm.
when he said, "Could you make me a cake if it wasn't about anything, not an anniversary or anything?" He's like, "Yeah, I could do that." And he goes, "Well, then it would be mine. Then I could do whatever I want." Did you see where Dave Rubin was going to go with that? He was going to say, "Well, I could make it an anniversary cake,
Yeah, I kind of see
even
like
if you didn't want to."
that's also kind of like not really understanding because if you're like okay, let's say you're black and you go to a bakery and they're like, well, I don't really like serving black people. Like, there's no way out of that because that's really in the end that's kind of where this argument stems from, right? Which is that there are certain people who in the public square have some kind of issue with another person for some immutable reason about them, and should those people be able to use their businesses to discriminate against them, right? And so our government has said the answer is no. If you discriminate on someone for because of their religion, their ethnicity, their age, or their orientation, that's illegal.
Or a sexual
Yeah.
identity as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So if you're part of these one of these protected classes, you cannot be discriminated against. And I guess that's a cute way of like for Dave Rubin to like in his fantasy world where people can still discriminate, where he could get around it, I guess. But I feel like that's
Well,
literally
it was
regressive.
a jab. It
Yeah.
was a friendly jab, is what it
Yeah. Yeah.
was.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And make no mistake, the RFRA is what they use to pass that legislation where they can decline a gay person a cake. But in all honesty, in my 11 years in management, I can tell you one of the worst ideas for a business to do is to politicize themselves. Because the moment you do that, you ostracize a particular constituent. And I worked for a multi-conglomerate corporation, pretty big one. And I can tell you that their stance, like, because I've had people come through the drive-through and call me faggot and stuff like that. And they say, don't let it get to you, because the thing is they don't care if you walk in as liberal in spades, like the true egalitarian humanitarian. They want to cater to that person.
mhm.
They also want to cater to the person that walks in wearing a KKK robe, because in their eyes, it's about business.
Yeah.
Period.
Yep. Yep. That's
It's a
that's definitely the case.
person putting money in the pockets of the employees and the employer, and
Mhm.
that's the extent of the business interaction.
Yeah.
Sargon of Akkad keeps preaching this to people: do not make your company politicized, because the moment you do, you will ostracize a group of constituents that could potentially be a customer to you, and that's something you don't want to do.
Yep. All
If
right.
you
Cool.
want your
Yeah.
business to
I think
thrive, don't do that.
I think we can end on that note. Yeah, it's been a good conversation. Hopefully, we can speak again at some point in the future. But yeah, take
Absolutely.
take care, everyone.